Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be coming at you with a video talking about the Utah Jazz. So if you don't know or if you haven't been keeping up with the standings lately in the NBA season, the Jazz are currently 8 and 11, which is good for the 14th best record in the Western Conference. Now, could this ship be easily righted, and could the Jazz make the playoffs? Sure. There's plenty of time left in the season. They could go on a three-game winning streak right now and be the 8 or the 9 seed, and then from there go on to make the playoffs pretty easily. But for the purposes of this video, I think it'd be more interesting to talk about what the Jazz might need to do to improve their team and get back to the level of play that they were at last year. And so for that, I've come up with 5 distinct trade possibilities that the Utah Jazz could make to improve their team going forward and to make a playoff push. So if you don't remember from last year, the Jazz did pretty well. They were the 4 seed. They did really well once Rudy Gobert came back in the second half of the season. They're sort of the surprise team of the NBA. No one even expected them to make the playoffs, but with the emergence of Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell especially, they made a push and they got into the playoffs and did really well, making it to the second round before ultimately losing to the Houston Rockets. And people expected them to build upon that, and a lot of people, including myself, were thinking that they'd do better this season and be the 3 seed in the West behind Golden State and Houston before people knew how weird the standings were going to be this year. Uh, so that being said, they're definitely underachieving, being currently the 14 seed. Now, all of the seeds are very close, so that doesn't mean a ton right now because, like, just for instance, between the 1 seed and the 9 seed is like a 3 game difference, and between like the 1 seed and the 14, there's like a 5 game difference or a 6 game difference. So it's not like this stuff is insurmountable or that they can't improve from where they're at now. But I think that it would be good for them to make some sort of a move just to set themselves apart because they have been struggling this year on defense and they always were offensively limited because basically Donovan Mitchell is their only like good offensive weapon that can create shots for himself. You've got other nice offensive pieces. Derek Favors is good in the low post. Rudy Gobert has been improving offensively, although he is still limited, I would say. Ricky Rubio is good at driving and dishing, not a good shooter though. So uh, and then along with that, you got Joe Ingles, who's a good catch and shoot guy, but can't really create for himself. So basically, besides Donovan Mitchell, every other one of their starters has a pretty significant limitation, whether it be shooting or creating their own shot. So that being said, I think that they definitely need to trade for some offensive talent. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So the first trade I have is between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Utah Jazz. Oh, and by the way, before I get into all these, Utah was a very hard team to come up for trades for, considering no one no one would really want to accept Derek Favors' $17 million a year contract in a trade being realistic, and it's hard to trade when your best player only makes $3 million because that doesn't really match up with any other team, and also no one's gonna want to. It's just they have a lot of weird contracts where like they don't have many guys that make like $10 million a year that are pretty easy to trade. Like Joe Ingles, they really don't want to get rid of unless it's for a superstar, and they don't really have a lot of guys that they can like pair. Like they could pair a guy like a Jay Crowder and a Joe Ingles, but there aren't many teams that are gonna want that for a superstar in exchange. And well, just there was a lot of factors that made it hard to do, and also in a lot of these videos, I prey on teams that are doing a lot of rebuilding to trade with them to have them unload pieces they don't want, sort of for like 70 cents on the dollar for stuff that isn't equal to what they would be normally equal to. But considering that basically every team in the West is trying to build right now, and they're not really looking to rebuild, but they're trying to contend, it's really hard to come up with trades because that eliminates like half of the pool that you usually are dealing with. And on the other half, even there's a lot of teams that are sort of past the rebuild, blow it up stage and are already trying to build up again. So those teams, it's hard to. It just really limited the scope of trades I could come up with. So if you think that some of these are preposterous, just have that in mind that the Jazz have a really funky roster and salary cap in that their players get just the structure of how they have different players getting paid made it difficult to form trades, and then also the lack of teams that are trying to blow things up right now made it hard to find realistic good trades. But I did come up with 5 trades that I want to share. So the first one is between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Utah Jazz, and I essentially have Cleveland getting Derek Favors and Tabu Cephalosha in exchange for Kevin Love. Right now, Cephalosha is really not doing much for the Jazz, so he was an easy throw-in right here. And then Favors was another easy throw-in, just because his salary matches really well to Kevin Love's, and they play the same position. So the Jazz are taking on 24 million, and the Cavs are taking on 22 million. The big incentive for each team is that the Utah is getting an all-star in the middle of his prime. Although a little bit injury prone, he would arguably be the second best player on this team, depending on how you see Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell, or you could even argue Kevin Love would be the best player on this team. Uh, and so they would immediately get an upgrade at power forward. And then for Cleveland, you would get off of that huge Kevin Love contract that they just signed him to. You'd save yourself 5 years of paying him that. Tabu Cephalosha's contract expires at the end of this year, which is good, and Derek Favors has this year and next year on his contract. But really, overall, you're getting out of that money a lot sooner than if you were to keep Kevin Love. So that's the first trade scenario: Favors and Tabu Cephalosha for Kevin Love. The second one I have here is one that again is a team trying to sell off a good player, sort of for 70 cents on the dollar because uh, just chemistry and stuff like that. So I have Utah and Washington trading. I have Utah getting John Wall and Washington getting Ricky Rubio and Jay Crowder. So again, what's the motivation for Utah? They get an all-star in their prime. I'd argue John Wall would be the best player on this team going there. Obviously, the drawback for Utah is that they're going to owe John Wall a ton of money in the future. His contract actually makes more sense this year because he's making around 20 million, and so he can be traded for Rubio and Jay Crowder. But it's going forward after this season where this trade wouldn't be possible because the salaries wouldn't match. For Washington, they get Ricky Rubio back, who's still a pretty like a starter caliber point guard in the NBA, where you could plug him in as a starter and he'd do pretty well. And then Jay Crowder would be a good starter or sixth man who could back up Otto Porter and would be good along the bench with Kelly Oubre. He's played a little bit more power forward this season, typically a small forward, but he can shoot it pretty well, so you can put him at either spot and he'll do well. Uh, Again, Washington gets another good rotation piece, and Ricky Rubio's contract expires 14 million off the books, so Washington can go out and make a significant signing with that. And also they avoid the albatross that they consider John Wall's contract to be going forward. And Jay Crowder's making a very respectable $7 million a year, which is pretty reasonable for a good role player. So I think that Washington benefits in that they get a lot of cap relief, and Utah benefits in that they upgrade they get a significant upgrade at point guard, and they essentially would acquire a player better than anybody that they have right now without giving up their 2 best players. Trade number 3 I have is a similar situation in which a team gives up a big piece to acquire. Uh, Basically, a team gives up a big piece to acquire cap relief. I have the Charlotte Hornets sending Kemba Walker along with Nicholas Batum to Utah in exchange for Ricky Rubio, Derek Favors, Grayson Allen, and Royce O'Neal. So I'll just cover the Utah side of this before I go into Charlotte because they're acquiring a lot more, 4 players instead of 2. So for Utah, you get Kemba Walker, who is a significant offensive upgrade at point guard over Rubio. He's making a really respectable $12 million a year. So that's not bad for your cap. You're gonna have to re-sign him after this season because his contract is expiring, and he's gonna want a fat deal, probably around $30 million. So you're gonna have to be able to fork that up. Nick Batum is the thing that you have to swallow with this trade, in that you get Kemba and you improve, but then you also have to accept Nicholas Batum's $24 million a year. Now he was a really good player 2 year or let's see here. In the 15 to 16 season in Charlotte, he did really well, and he did really well before that in Portland. But since then, he's not been the same player. Hopefully, going to a playoff contender maybe could revitalize his career a bit and encourage him to play better. And basically, you get an all-star starting point guard and a pretty good small forward who you could start or you could bring off the bench. Most likely, they're going to bring him off the bench. But if you want to go small ball, you could put him in at the small forward and have Joe Ingles start at the power forward. Whatever they want, but he's still a pretty decent 3-and-D player. Okay, so for Charlotte's side, they acquire Ricky Rubio, who again is on a expiring contract for $14 to $15 million a year. It's $14.9 million. So they get him off the books. Derek Favors, his contract is for $17 million. So, and it's for 2 years, and that expires before Batum's contract of $24 million over 3 years, or $24 million every year for 3 years. But you get out of his money a year earlier. Also, it's $7 million less, so you avoid as much a cap hardship in the next 2 years. And then you get Grayson Allen, who's a promising young player, and Royce O'Neal, who's a promising young player back. They were just sort of like incentives to make Charlotte want this a little bit more, and also to make salaries match a little bit better. But you do get 2 really young, promising players, along with the 2 big, notable starter caliber players that you'd be acquiring. Trade number 4. This one is a really odd one, and so I realize this is probably the one that'd be least likely to happen, I think. But that being said, I have this one. Okay, so I have the Boston Celtics acquiring Utah's first-round pick in this next year's draft, and Ekpe Udoh, who's a backup center, in exchange for Terry Rozier. So now Udoh and Rozier's salaries match, so the trade works from that perspective. And I think Boston would be incentivized by the first-round pick, which they always are trying to get their hands on and acquire assets. So they get those 2 pieces. And then Utah gets us a good point guard who I think I would argue is equal to Rubio in value. And really, I honestly think that he could be a good 6th man. You could even play Rubio at the shooting guard sometime. Or just you could play Rozier and Rubio together and wouldn't be disastrous because Rubio is 6'4", so he's a little bit taller. And in today's NBA, you see 6'4" being more of a normal height for a shooting guard instead of the 6'6", 6'7", which I think most people are used to from years past. But Utah gets an offensive upgrade off the bench. Boston gets a first-round pick, and they also avoid the awkward pressure to re-sign Terry Rozier that I think they might have faced in the offseason. Both contracts are expiring, so Boston gets the money off of the deal for Udoh after the season, and he provides a little bit more oomph as far as physicality. They have Aaron Baines, but he's kind of a big lug sometimes, so I don't know what I think about him. Going to Boston, that is. Or being their primary center, I mean. I feel like Ekpe Udoh could provide you 15 minutes off the bench, sort of like what bringing in Tyson Chandler to the Lakers did. He can just grab you 5 rebounds in 15 minutes, and Al Horford can play more power forward, which it seems like is what he likes more these days. And so you get a little bit of help on the low block for Boston. I have one alternate trade that I would do for the Boston-Utah scenario, and that would be Gordon Hayward in exchange for Ricky Rubio and Derek Favors. Now, before you call this ridiculous, just think about it. Derek Favors provides the same physicality and oomph off the bench that I was just talking about with Udoh. He could be your backup center. You could play him with Horford, and he could take on the more physical opponent of the power forward and center on the other team. Ricky Rubio is an expiring contract. You get $15 million off the books after he's gone. Derek Favors is on for 2 years, whereas Gordon Hayward's on for this year and 2 more years. So you get off the books of the Favors money a year earlier, and you get your $30 million back. You get $15 million back after this year, and the other you get $17 million back after next season, which is sooner than the 31 that'd be tied up with Gordon Hayward. That he's on the books for this year, the year after, and the year after that. So if you're Boston, you get your money back faster. You get a probably one of the best backup point guards in the league with Ricky Rubio. Um, you get a good physical low post player in Derek Favors, and so and basically the biggest draw for them would be getting rid of Gordon Hayward's money because I think they have some buyer's remorse right now about signing Gordon Hayward. For Utah, you get exactly what this team needs, a wing scorer who can shoot the ball. Now, yes, is Gordon Hayward having a down year? For sure, and he is shooting poorly. He's shooting, I think, 41% from the field, 29% from three, which is not great, but they need a wing scorer who can create his own shot, and Gordon Hayward brings that to the table. I think that give him 50 games and he'll be back to his previous form. Or not previous form, but I think that you might see those shooting numbers tick up quite a bit. I would hope that he can get up to numbers somewhere around 45% from the field and 35% from three. That would be really good. Maybe average around 15 to 16 points a game. If he could be that, he would be an astounding sixth man for the Jazz and could really improve the team. Okay, but moving on. That was just a little side one, but who knows? Okay, so my last trade scenario is between the Miami Heat and the Utah Jazz. So I have Utah acquiring Goran Dragic and Kelly Olynyk, and Miami acquiring Ricky Rubio and again Derek Favors. This money works out $30 million for $30 million. As far as Miami, again you get cap relief, which is big. Derek Favors' contract is for $17 million, and Kelly Olynyk's is roughly 13. But you get Derek Favors' contract off the books a year sooner than Olynyk's. And as far as Rubio, you get his money off the books after this season, the $15 million, and you avoid Goran Dragic being on the books for $18 million for this year and next year. So you get cap relief a lot more immediately, and you can kind of try and compensate for all the bad signings you made as far as Tyler Johnson and James Johnson, Dion Waiters, and Kelly Olynyk. You can kind of undo some of that cap strain by getting rid of these two guys and getting salary cap relief sooner. And again, you're not even acquiring bad players either. Ricky Rubio can start for this team. Derek Favors could plug in at the power forward and play since James Johnson's injured right now. And you still have probably about an equally talented team, honestly, is what you had previously. Because Derek Favors is better than James Johnson, I would say, or about equal. And Ricky Rubio is worse than Goran Dragic, but not that much worse. Like still a starting caliber point guard in the NBA. For Utah, you get exactly what they need. They get some spacing in Kelly Olynyk, who can shoot it a lot better than Derek Favors can. He's a worse defender, you'd say, but they still have Gobert as a rim protector, so they're going to be okay. He can also act as a backup center if you need that, and you don't want to play Udo as much at backup center because you want to maintain some spacing. And then you get Goran Dragic, who is a better shooter and scorer than Rubio, and they need more of an offensive punch, I think, more spacing. So you bring in Goran Dragic, he can create his own shot and shoot the three better, and you get him for an additional year that you don't have to re-sign Rubio to a contract to, because I think Rubio would want to, I don't know if he'd want a bigger contract, but I feel like the trend in the NBA is wanting to get paid more than you're worth, so you'd avoid that problem by holding on to Goran an additional year and not having to re-sign Rubio. So essentially, you get a little bit better offensively, a little bit worse defensively, but you adjust the need of shot creation and spacing, which this team had the concern of. Those are all the scenarios I got, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining. I know that a lot of these trade scenarios were kind of odd and seemed possibly unrealistic, but as I said at the beginning, it was pretty hard to come up with good trade scenarios for the Jazz just because of the status of the NBA right now and their team structure as far as how their contracts work, and their best player in Donovan Mitchell making only $3 million a year. That actually made the trade, their salary cap is really wonky because of that, and their team structure is really wonky, so it was hard to come up with good trade scenarios, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave a comment agreeing or disagreeing with my trade scenarios and why teams would or wouldn't want to do trades I came up with, or give me trades that you've come up with in the comments too. I'd love to hear from you. Hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you later. Bye.